The sky of Velethan Prime had turned orange. Not the gentle orange of sunset, but a sick, angry color that hurt the eyes. The star that had given life to their world for millions of years was now killing it, growing larger and hotter with each passing month. Ambassador Kethra stood at the great window of the council chamber, her 4 thin arms folded behind her back. She was old now, her blue skin faded to pale gray at the edges, her large dark eyes tired from decades of service. Behind her, the 12 elders of the council waited in silence. They already knew what she was going to say. They had known for years, but hearing it spoken aloud would make it real. "The Dominion has refused us," Kethra said, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "They offered absorption. Our people would be scattered across their empire. Our language would be forbidden. Our children would be raised as Dominion citizens, not Velethi. They called it mercy." Elder Mothrin, the oldest among them, closed his eyes. And the collective? "They want genetic samples. They wish to study us, to improve us, to make us more efficient." Kethra's voice carried a rare hint of anger. "They see us as an interesting experiment, not as people." The merchant guilds? They quoted a price, 40 trillion standard credits for basic transport. No housing, no food, no medical care, just transport. She turned to face them. "We have perhaps 2 trillion in planetary assets." They knew this when they made the offer. The chamber fell silent. Outside, the orange sky flickered as another solar flare lit up the upper atmosphere. In the distance, Kethra could see the great cities of her people, the beautiful towers of crystal and light that had stood for 10,000 years. In less than 3 years, they would all be ash. 2.3 billion Velathi lived on this world. Scholars, artists, philosophers, children, families. Her people had given up war 5,000 years ago. They had turned their energy toward beauty and knowledge. They had built libraries that held the wisdom of 100 civilizations. They had created music that made other species weep with joy. And now they were going to die, because no one in the galaxy cared enough to save them. "There is one option remaining," Elder Mothrin said quietly. Kethra stiffened. She knew what he was going to say. "No, we have not asked the humans." "The humans are barbarians," another elder said quickly. "They have been in space for only 2 centuries. They have already fought 3 major wars. They build warships like other species build trading vessels. They are violent, chaotic, and dangerous." "They are also our last hope," Mothrin replied. Kethra walked back to the center of the chamber. Her mind was filled with everything she had heard about the humans. They came from a death world, a planet that tried to kill them in 1,000 ways. Earthquakes, storms, floods, predators, diseases. And instead of dying, they had conquered it all. They were survivors in the darkest sense of the word. Every civilized species in the galaxy had warned the Velathi about humans. They were too aggressive, too emotional, too unpredictable. They formed attachments too quickly and fought too fiercely to protect them. They were not safe. But the alternative was extinction. "What do we have to lose?" Mothrin asked gently. "Our world is dying. Our people face annihilation. If the humans enslave us, at least our children will live. If they demand tribute, at least our culture might survive. And if they simply ignore us, we are no worse than we are now." Kethra looked around the chamber at the faces of the elders. She saw fear, exhaustion, and the faintest flicker of hope. She thought of her own grandchildren playing in the gardens below, unaware that their world had less than 1,000 days left. "Very well," she said. "I will send the message." The transmission was simple. Kethra did not beg. She did not make promises. She simply told the truth. Her world was dying. Her people needed help. They were asking for refuge, for sanctuary, for any assistance the humans could provide. She did not know what to expect in return. She only knew that she had to try. The message traveled across the stars at faster-than-light speed, bouncing through relay stations until it reached the edge of human space. Then she waited. 6 days. That was how long it took. 6 days of watching the sky grow more orange, of counting the solar flares, of trying not to think about the end. Then the sensors detected a ship entering their system. It was not what Kethra expected. She had prepared herself for a warship, bristling with weapons. She had prepared speeches for admirals and generals, ready to negotiate from a position of weakness. Instead, the ship that arrived was blocky and plain, painted white with strange symbols on its hull. It was not elegant. It was not threatening. It looked like a tool designed for work rather than war. The ship's name was FEMA 7. Kethra met the humans in the landing bay, surrounded by guards who tried not to look nervous. The ship's door opened, and a human woman walked out. She was short by Velothi standards, with dark hair pulled back from her face and tired eyes that had seen too much. She wore a rumpled uniform with patches on the shoulders. Behind her came more humans, carrying equipment and talking quickly among themselves. The woman walked straight up to Kethra and held out her hand. It took Kethra a moment to remember that this was a human greeting. "Commander Sarah Chen," the woman said. "United Earth Emergency Response Corps. We got your message." Kethra shook her hand carefully. "Thank you for coming. We were not sure anyone would respond." Commander Chen looked around the landing bay, at the nervous guards and the flickering lights. Then she looked up at the orange sky visible through the windows. Her expression did not change, but something in her eyes sharpened. "We respond to everyone," she said simply. Then she pulled out a small device and began tapping on it. "All right. Show me the damage." Kethra blinked. "I am sorry?" "The damage. Your star is expanding, correct? How much time do we have? How many people need evacuation? What is the current state of your infrastructure? Do you have hospitals, schools, cultural sites that need priority attention?" The questions came rapidly, professionally. Chen was already walking toward the exit, expecting Kethra to follow. "Commander, I do not understand," Kethra said, hurrying to keep up. "We have not discussed terms. We have not negotiated a treaty. What do you want in return for your help?" Chen stopped walking. She turned to look at Kethra with genuine confusion on her face, as if the question made no sense to her. "Want? You asked for help. We are the Emergency Response Corps. This is what we do." She started walking again. "Now I need to see the damage so we can figure out how to fix this. We are wasting time." Kethra stood frozen for a moment, watching the small human woman march away with absolute purpose. In all her decades of diplomacy, she had never encountered anything like this. No demands, no negotiations, just action. She did not know whether to feel hope or fear, perhaps both. She hurried after Commander Chen, wondering what she had invited into her world. Commander Chen did not sleep for the first 3 days. Kethra watched her move through their world like a force of nature. She visited the great cities and the small villages. She walked through hospitals and schools. She climbed to the top of their tallest towers and descended into their deepest archives. Everywhere she went, she asked questions and wrote things down. More humans arrived on the second day. A tall, dark-skinned man named Marcus Okonkwo, who called himself the chief engineer. A fierce woman with gray hair named Diana Reyes, who led something called the Hazardous Environment Response Team. Dozens of others, all wearing the same rumpled uniforms, all carrying equipment, all moving with the same urgent purpose. They did not behave like any visitors the Velothi had ever known. The Dominion ambassadors had demanded luxury quarters and elaborate ceremonies. The collective representatives had wanted sterile environments and precise schedules. The Merchant Guild negotiators had expected gifts and entertainment. The humans wanted maps, population data, and infrastructure reports. They set up their equipment in empty rooms and worked around the clock. They ate simple food and slept in shifts. When Kethra tried to arrange a formal welcome ceremony, Commander Chen politely refused. "We do not have time for ceremonies," she said. "Your star is not going to wait." On the fourth day, the humans gathered the Council of Elders for what they called a briefing. Kethra sat with the others in the council chamber, watching the humans set up display screens and data projections. She still did not understand what was happening. Chief Engineer Okonkwo stood before them, his deep voice calm and professional. "Here is what we know. Your star has entered an accelerated expansion phase. Based on our measurements, you have approximately 847 days before surface conditions become unsurvivable. That is our working timeline." The elders stirred uneasily. They had known this, but hearing it stated so plainly was difficult. "Your current evacuation capacity is approximately 12,000 individuals per year," Okonkwo continued. "You have 6 transport ships, all designed for cargo rather than passengers. At your current rate, you could evacuate perhaps 24,000 people before the end, out of 2.3 billion. Elder Mothrin spoke quietly. "We know our situation is hopeless. That is why we asked for help." "Your situation is not hopeless," Commander Chen said, stepping forward. "It is difficult. There is a difference. Hopeless means there is no solution. Difficult means the solution requires effort." She tapped a control, and the display changed to show a complex diagram of ships, routes, and timelines. "This is what we are proposing. A full-scale planetary evacuation. We have already contacted Earth and requested resources. Ships are being prepared. Personnel are being assembled. We are going to get everyone off this planet." The chamber fell silent. "Everyone?" Kethra whispered. "Everyone. 2.3 billion people, plus cultural artifacts, historical archives, genetic samples of your native species, and anything else you consider essential to your civilization." Chen's voice was matter-of-fact, as if she was discussing a routine operation. "It will be the largest evacuation in human history, but it can be done." Elder Mothrin leaned forward. "Commander, forgive me, but this seems impossible. The cost alone would be astronomical. The logistics would be beyond anything ever attempted. Why would your people agree to such an undertaking?" Chen exchanged a glance with her colleagues. Something passed between them, some understanding that the Velothi could not read. "May I speak frankly?" she asked. "Please," the Velothi replied. "Humans have a long history of disasters. Our planet tried to kill us in every way possible. Earthquakes leveled our cities. Storms drowned our coastlines. Diseases killed millions. We have seen civilizations fall, populations displaced, entire regions made uninhabitable." She paused, her eyes distant for a moment. "And every single time, people helped. Strangers pulled strangers from the wreckage. Nations sent aid to nations they had been at war with a decade before. People crossed oceans to dig through rubble for survivors they would never meet." Fire Chief Reyes spoke up, her voice rough. "We build systems for this. Organizations whose only purpose is to respond to disasters. That is what we are. Emergency responders. When something terrible happens, we go toward it, not away from it." "But we are not your people," Kethra said. "We are aliens. We have nothing to offer you. We cannot repay this debt." Commander Chen looked at her steadily. "It is not a debt. It is a response to a crisis. You are people in danger. We can help. Therefore, we will help. That is the entire calculation. Chief Engineer Okonkwo smiled slightly. Besides, this is going to be an incredible engineering challenge. My teams are actually excited about it. 2.3 billion people in less than 3 years. We will have to invent new solutions just to make it work. The elders sat in stunned silence. Kethra felt tears forming in her eyes, though she did not fully understand why. For decades, she had negotiated with species who saw her people as resources to be exploited or problems to be ignored. She had grown used to transactional relationships, to calculating costs and benefits, to understanding that nothing in the galaxy came without a price. And now these strange, aggressive, supposedly barbaric humans were offering to save her entire civilization simply because they could. "I do not understand you," she said finally. "I have studied dozens of species. I have negotiated with the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. I thought I understood how the universe worked, but I do not understand you at all." Commander Chen smiled, the first genuine smile Kethra had seen from her. "We confuse everyone, even ourselves sometimes." She turned back to the displays. "Now we have a lot of work to do, and not much time. I need your full cooperation in gathering data, coordinating logistics, and preparing your people for evacuation. There will be fear and confusion. We will need local leaders to help maintain order and keep people informed." "You will have everything we can give," Elder Mothrin said. His voice was thick with emotion. "Everything." "Good." Chen pulled out her communication device. "Then let us begin." She made a call, and Kethra listened to the simple words that would change everything. "This is Chen. We have a Class 7 planetary evacuation." "Yes, the whole planet. I need everything you can send." "Yes, everything." She ended the call and looked at the elders. "Ships will begin arriving within the week. I suggest we use that time to establish evacuation protocols and identify priority sites. Chief Reyes, I want your teams assessing the most dangerous regions first. Engineer Okonkwo, start planning landing sites for heavy equipment." The humans began moving, talking, working. The chamber that had been silent with despair filled with activity and purpose. Kethra watched them, still struggling to believe what was happening. For the first time in years, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. She did not know if the humans could truly save her people. The task seemed impossible, even with their confidence and their systems and their strange dedication. But they were going to try. They were going to throw everything they had at the problem, not because they would gain from it, but because helping people was simply what they did. Perhaps the galaxy had been wrong about humans. Perhaps aggression and compassion were not opposites, but two sides of the same fierce spirit. Perhaps these barbarians were exactly what her people needed. She straightened her shoulders and walked over to Commander Chen. "Tell me what you need," she said. "I will make it happen." Chen nodded, and they got to work. The ships came like stars falling in reverse. On the 10th day after Commander Chen's call, the first wave arrived. 12 massive vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel and settled into orbit around Velathan Prime. They were not elegant ships. They were workhorses, designed for function rather than beauty. Their hulls were scarred from years of service. Their names were painted on their sides in bright letters: Hope, Perseverance, Second Chance, Lifeline. On the 20th day, more arrived, and more, and more. The Valathi had never seen anything like it. Ships filled the orbital lanes until the planet looked like it wore a crown of metal and light. Construction vessels carrying prefabricated buildings. Hospital ships held medical equipment for species they had never treated before. Transport ships were retrofitted with comfortable quarters for passengers who would be traveling far from everything they had ever known. Thousands of them. Kethra stood at the main spaceport and watched them pour out of their vessels like water from a broken dam. Engineers in heavy work clothes, carrying tools and equipment. Medical personnel in white uniforms, setting up triage stations before they had even found their quarters. Logistics coordinators, with tablets and headsets, organizing the chaos into something that almost made sense. And the firefighters, the hazardous environment teams in their reinforced suits, already heading toward the most dangerous regions to assess the risks. Chief Engineer Okonkwo led the construction effort. Within the first week, his teams had built 3 new landing pads capable of handling the largest transport ships. Within the second week, they had constructed a massive processing center where evacuees would be registered, medically examined, and assigned to ships. The Velothi watched in amazement as buildings rose from nothing in a matter of days. Human construction methods were rough compared to their elegant crystal towers, but they were fast. Incredibly fast. "You build as if you are racing against time," Elder Mothrin observed one day, watching a team assemble a housing unit in hours. Okonkwo wiped sweat from his forehead and smiled. "We are always racing against time. That is the first lesson of emergency response. Every hour matters. Every minute can be the difference between life and death." He pointed to a young human woman who was directing a group of Velothi volunteers in moving supplies. "See her? That is Lieutenant Park. 3 years ago, she helped evacuate a coastal city on Earth before a massive storm. They had 48 hours. They saved 97% of the population. The 3% they lost still keeps her up at night." Only 3%, and she considers it a failure? We do not measure success by how many we saved. We measure it by how many we could not save. 1 is too many. Okonkwo turned back to his work. 1 is always too many. Kethra found herself drawn to the medical teams. She had expected them to be cold and clinical, focused only on physical health. Instead, she discovered something unexpected. Among the doctors and nurses were people called counselors and psychologists. Their job was not to heal bodies, but to heal minds. "Evacuation is traumatic," a human woman named Dr. Hassan explained to her. "People are leaving everything they have ever known. Their homes, their communities, their sense of identity. If we do not address the emotional impact, we will save their bodies, but lose their spirits." "You have specialists for this? For feelings?" Dr. Hassan smiled gently. "We learned the hard way that saving a life means more than keeping a heart beating. A person who survives but cannot cope with their survival has not truly been saved. So yes, we have specialists for feelings. Many of them." The logistics coordinators were perhaps the strangest humans of all. They did not build things or heal people. They managed information, tracking millions of details simultaneously. Ship schedules, supply inventories, evacuation priorities, family groups that needed to stay together, individuals with special medical needs, cultural artifacts requiring careful handling. One coordinator, a young man named James Wright, broke down crying one afternoon. Kethra found him sitting behind a storage building, his face in his hands. "What is wrong?" she asked carefully. "I just learned that your people do not have a word for orphan," he said, his voice breaking. "You do not have orphans because your extended families always take in children who lose their parents. It is beautiful. It is so beautiful, and I am crying because we are going to scatter your families across a dozen different ships, and I have to figure out how to keep them together." He wiped his eyes and stood up, pulling out his tablet. "I need to build a family tracking database. Tonight. I will not let families be separated." He walked away, already talking into his headset, organizing a team to solve a problem he had discovered 5 minutes ago. Kethra stood alone for a moment, overwhelmed by what she was witnessing. These humans felt everything so intensely. They cried over problems, and then immediately worked to solve them. They carried the weight of every life on their shoulders, and refused to let any burden slow them down. On the 45th day, something happened that spread across the planet within hours. A building in the northern city of Velathon began to collapse. It was an ancient archive, filled with irreplaceable texts and artwork from 10,000 years of Velothi history. The solar radiation had weakened its foundations, and it was falling apart. The Velothi evacuation teams pulled back to safety, following standard protocols. The building was lost. The history inside it was lost. It was tragic, but there was nothing to be done. Then the humans arrived. Fire Chief Diana Reyes led her team into the collapsing structure without hesitation. They moved through falling debris and crumbling walls, pulling out artifacts and loading them onto transport vehicles. When the ceiling began to give way, they did not retreat. They worked faster. Reyes herself carried out the final load, a chest containing manuscripts that predated spaceflight. She emerged from the building just as the main hall collapsed behind her. Her suit was torn, her arm was burned from falling material, and she was grinning like a mad woman. "Got it," she said, handing the chest to a stunned Velothi archivist. "Sorry about the damage. We will have someone look at the container." Then she went to get her arm treated and was back on duty 3 hours later. Word of the rescue spread quickly. The Velothi had never seen anything like it. People running toward danger instead of away from it. Risking their lives for objects, for history, for things that had no survival value, but meant everything to a civilization. Elder Mothrin sought out Chief Engineer Okonkwo that evening. "I must ask you something that has been troubling me since your people arrived." "Of course. Why do you do this? Why do your people risk so much for strangers? I have lived for 200 years, and I have never seen any species behave this way. What drives you?" Okonkwo was quiet for a long moment. He looked up at the orange sky, then back at the elder. "Because we remember," he said softly. "We remember every disaster in our history. The earthquakes that leveled cities, the floods that drowned millions, the wars that tore nations apart. And we remember that every time, someone helped. Strangers helping strangers. People crossing continents to pull survivors from rubble. Nations sending aid to enemies." He turned to face Mothrin directly. "It is not instinct. It is a choice. Every generation has to make that choice again. We can turn away from suffering, or we can turn toward it. We can protect only ourselves, or we can protect everyone we can reach. We chose to be helpers. It is who we are now, who we decided to be." Mothrin absorbed this in silence. Then he did something that surprised even himself. He reached out and placed his thin hand on the human's shoulder, a gesture of deep respect among the Velothi. "Perhaps," he said, "the galaxy has greatly underestimated your people." Okonkwo laughed, a warm and genuine sound. "They usually do. We are used to it." Above them, another fleet of ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, their lights blinking as they joined the Armada of Mercy. More help was coming, more people ready to work, to sacrifice, to save. The evacuation was only beginning. The solar flare came without warning. One moment, the teams were working on schedule, evacuating hundreds of thousands of Velothi each week. The next moment, the star seemed to explode outward, throwing a wave of radiation and heat at the planet, like an angry fist. The Northern Hemisphere took the worst of it. 3 major evacuation sites were destroyed in an instant. Communication networks went dark. When the radiation pulse passed, the damage reports began to come in, and they were devastating. 200,000 Velothi were stranded in the blast zone. The radiation levels were climbing rapidly. Without immediate evacuation, they would all die within days. Commander Chen stood in the command center, surrounded by screens showing destruction and chaos. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady as she assessed the situation. "How many humans do we have in that region?" she asked. 47 team members, all accounted for at the shelter sites, Lieutenant Park reported. They are safe, for now, but their radiation suits are not rated for prolonged exposure at these levels. And the Velothi? Scattered across a dozen small communities. Some are in shelters, others are in the open. The radiation is killing them slowly. Chen closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her decision was made. Get me Chief Reyes. Diana Reyes arrived within minutes, her gray hair pulled back and her eyes sharp. She had been directing rescue operations in another sector, but she had heard the news. She knew why Chen had called her. How bad is it? She asked. Bad. 200,000 people. Lethal radiation. Maybe 72 hours before conditions become completely unsurvivable. Chen met her eyes. I am asking for volunteers only. This is not an order. Anyone who goes in there is going to absorb significant radiation. Some of them may not come back. Reyes nodded slowly. I understand. You do not have to lead this yourself. You have earned the right to send others. Something flickered across Reyes's weathered face. Not anger, not fear, but something deeper. A kind of certainty that came from decades of running toward fires while everyone else ran away. Commander, I have been doing this job for 35 years. I have led teams into burning buildings, collapsing mines, toxic spills, and radioactive zones. I have buried friends and trained their replacements. And I have never once asked someone to do something I was not willing to do myself. She straightened her shoulders. I will lead the teams. Get me everyone who is willing to go. The call went out across the human forces. The message was simple and honest. This is a high-risk rescue operation. Radiation exposure is guaranteed. Casualties are possible. Only volunteers will be accepted. Within an hour, every member of the hazardous environment response teams had volunteered. So had dozens of engineers, medics, and ordinary support staff. They had to turn people away because too many wanted to go. The Dominion had a ship monitoring the situation from the edge of the system. When they saw the humans preparing to enter the radiation zone, they sent a message to Commander Chen. Your people will die for this. The radiation levels are lethal. Even your famous stubbornness cannot change physics. What is the point? Chen's response was broadcast across the entire system. The point is 200,000 people who deserve to live. Now get off this channel. We are busy. She cut the transmission and turned back to the rescue coordination. The teams deployed within hours. They went in waves, each group working for as long as their suits could protect them before rotating out. They drove emergency vehicles through devastated streets, their sensors screaming warnings about the radiation. They went door to door in destroyed buildings, searching for survivors. They found them. Families huddled in basements, children hiding under collapsed roofs, elderly Velothi who had accepted death, only to see strange creatures in bulky suits pull them to safety. The evacuation points were set up just outside the radiation zone. Velothi were loaded onto transports as fast as they arrived, rushed to medical ships where they could be treated for exposure. The humans kept going back, again and again and again. Chief Reyes led from the front. At 62 years old, she outworked people half her age. Her radiation counter climbed steadily, but she refused to rotate out until every member of her team had taken their mandatory breaks first. On the second day, her suit began to fail. The seals were weakening from the constant exposure. She reported the problem and was ordered to withdraw. She did not withdraw. Instead, she found a Velothi family trapped in a collapsed community center. 2 adults and 3 children, too weak to move on their own. The ceiling above them was unstable, ready to collapse at any moment. Reyes went in alone, because there was no time to wait for backup. She carried the children out one by one, moving as fast as her tired body would allow. Then she went back for the adults, supporting them on her shoulders as the building groaned around her. They made it out. Just as the ceiling came down, burying the space where the family had been hiding. Then, Reyes collapsed. Her team rushed to her side, pulling her into the medical transport. The radiation readings from her suit were catastrophic. She had absorbed more than 3 times the lethal dose over the past 2 days. Her body was shutting down. They rushed her to the medical ship, but everyone knew the truth. There was no treatment that could undo this much damage. For 2 days, Diana Reyes held on. The Velothi she had saved came to see her, standing outside her medical room with tears streaming down their faces. The children she had carried from the ruins sat in the hallway, refusing to leave. The Council of Elders sent a delegation to honor her. When Kethra arrived, she found the room filled with humans and Velothi alike. Chief Engineer Okonkwo was there, his face wet with tears. Commander Chen stood by the bed, holding Reyes's hand. Reyes was conscious, though barely. Her body was covered in radiation burns, but her eyes were still sharp. She saw Kethra enter and managed a weak smile. "Ambassador," she whispered, "did we get them all?" 194,000, Kethra replied, her voice breaking. "You saved almost everyone." "Almost." Reyes closed her eyes. "Should have been all of them." "Chief Reyes," Kethra moved closer, "I do not have words for what you and your people have done. You gave your life for strangers, for people you had never met. I do not understand, but I am grateful beyond measure." Reyes opened her eyes one more time. "Nothing to understand," she said softly. "Just people helping people. Simple as that." She squeezed Commander Chen's hand one final time. Then, she was gone. The room was silent, except for the sound of weeping. Humans and Velothi stood together, united in their grief for a woman who had died doing what she believed was right. Outside, the rescue operations continued. There were still people to save, still work to be done. That was what Reyes would have wanted. The funeral was held 3 days later. Every human on the planet attended, along with thousands of Velothi who had never met the woman they were mourning. Commander Chen gave the eulogy, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. Diana Reyes ran toward the fire. That is all the eulogy she would have wanted. She spent her entire life running toward fires, toward floods, toward every disaster that threatened the innocent. And in the end, she gave her life doing exactly that. Chen looked out at the crowd, at the humans and Velothi standing together. 23 humans died in this rescue operation. 23 people who volunteered to walk into certain danger to save strangers. Remember their names. Remember what they gave. And when the history of this evacuation is written, let it be known that they did not hesitate, not for one moment. The Velothi elders stepped forward and performed their most sacred mourning ritual, a ceremony reserved for the greatest heroes of their civilization. Diana Reyes became the first human ever honored in this way. Above them the orange sky continued to burn, but the work continued too. The star's expansion accelerated faster than anyone had predicted. 847 days became 612. The scientists recalculated their models and delivered the news with grim faces. Less than 2 years to evacuate an entire civilization. Commander Chen heard the report and nodded once. Then she made another call. "This is Chen. We need more ships. We need them faster. Push the schedules. Call in every favor. We are not leaving anyone behind." More ships came. The galaxy was watching now, and something strange was happening. The same species that had refused to help, that had demanded tribute and absorption and impossible payments, began to change their minds. The Merchant Guild sent 50 transport ships, offered at cost rather than profit. Their representative claimed it was a business decision, but she could not meet Chen's eyes when she said it. The collective sent medical supplies and evacuation protocols they had developed over centuries. They offered no explanation, only assistance. Even the Dominion contributed, though quietly. Their ships appeared at the edge of the system, transferred resources, and left without making contact. They never acknowledged the help, but the supplies kept coming. Something about watching the humans had changed them. Something about seeing people run into radiation zones and die for strangers had cracked open doors that had been closed for millennia. Chief Engineer Okonkwo worked without rest. His teams built evacuation infrastructure at speeds that should have been impossible. When one challenge arose, they solved it. When another appeared, they adapted. The phrase became a kind of prayer among the human workers. We adapt. We overcome. We get it done. The last months were brutal. Ships launched around the clock. Processing centers ran at maximum capacity. Velothi families said goodbye to the only world they had ever known, carrying whatever they could hold in their arms. Kethro worked beside the humans until she forgot what sleep felt like. She registered evacuees, comforted frightened children, and helped elderly Velothi who were too proud to ask for assistance. She learned to speak basic English and taught human workers common Velothi phrases. In those final desperate weeks, the differences between species seemed to disappear. They were all just people trying to save what they could. The last transport left Velathan Prime with 6 hours to spare. Commander Chen was on it, along with the final evacuation teams and the remaining elders. They lifted off into the orange sky, climbing higher and higher until the planet fell away beneath them. Kethro watched through the viewport as her world grew smaller. The beautiful crystal cities, the ancient forests, the oceans that had sung with life for millions of years. All of it would be ash within days. She should have felt grief. She did feel grief. But she also felt something else, something unexpected. Pride. 2.3 billion Velothi had been evacuated. Every single one. Not a single person left behind. The largest rescue operation in the history of any species had succeeded beyond all reasonable hope. Commander Chen came to stand beside her. The human woman looked exhausted, her uniform stained with work and stress, her eyes red from nights without sleep. But she was smiling. "We did it," she said quietly. "You did it," Kethro replied. "My people will spend generations trying to understand what you have done for us." Chen shook her head. "We did it. All of us. Your people organized beautifully. Without your cooperation, your courage, your willingness to trust strangers, this would have been impossible. It was a partnership." The ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, and Velathan Prime disappeared from view. The next time anyone saw that system, there would be nothing left but a swollen red star, consuming empty space. The journey to New Velathan took 3 weeks. The planet had been chosen carefully, a world with conditions similar to the Velothi homeworld. Human terraforming teams had been working on it for months, preparing the land for agriculture, building the foundations of cities, creating the infrastructure that would support a civilization. When the first Velothi ships landed, they found humans waiting for them. Not just the emergency response teams, but colonists. Volunteers who had chosen to settle alongside the Velothi to help them rebuild, to become neighbors and friends. Thousands of humans had signed up to leave Earth and start new lives on a strange world, just so the Velothi would not have to rebuild alone. 1 year later, the Velothi held a ceremony to mark their survival. They gathered in the central square of their new capital city, a city they had named Hope, in honor of the human ship that had been the first to arrive. Around them, buildings rose where empty land had been. Gardens grew where nothing had grown before. Children played in streets that had not existed 12 months ago. At the center of the square stood a monument. It was carved from stone that had been brought from Velathan Prime, one of the last loads evacuated before the end. The stone shimmered with the same light as the crystal towers that were now gone forever. The monument showed a human figure, reaching down to lift a child. The face was Diana Reyes, captured forever in the moment of her greatest heroism. At her feet, 23 names were carved in both Velathy script and English. Every human who had died in the evacuation. Above the names, an inscription in 2 languages. We asked for refuge. They gave us everything. Commander Chen attended the ceremony, though she tried to stay in the background. She did not succeed. The Velathy found her and surrounded her with gratitude, touching her shoulders in the gesture of deepest respect, speaking words of thanks that she could barely understand through her tears. She was not the same woman who had stepped off FEMA 7 2 years ago. Her hair had gone gray from stress. Her hands trembled from radiation damage sustained during the final weeks. She would need treatment for the rest of her life. But she was smiling. Afterward, she sat with Kethra on a hill overlooking the new city. The sun was setting, a stable golden sun that would not try to kill anyone. The sky was blue instead of orange. They sat in comfortable silence for a long time, watching the lights come on in the city below. Human lights and Velathy lights mixed together, impossible to tell apart. I still do not understand, Kethra said finally. I have thought about it every day since you arrived. No trade agreements, no territory demands, no cultural requirements. Your people died for us. Why? Chen watched the sunset, her damaged hands resting quietly in her lap. You asked for help. We could help. That is really all there is to it. That cannot be all. No species works that way. There must be something more. There is not. Chen turned to look at her, and her eyes were kind but also sad. I know it seems impossible. I know you are searching for the hidden motive, the secret agenda, but there is none. We help because we can. We save because we are able. It is not complicated. Kethra was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke slowly, working through thoughts she had been wrestling with for months. I think I finally understand why the galaxy fears you. Chen raised an eyebrow. Our weapons? Our aggression? No. Kethra's voice was soft with wonder. Because you make the rest of us realize what we could be, and we are ashamed that we are not. She looked out at the city, at the humans and Velathy working together in the streets below. Your people showed us something we had forgotten. That kindness can be strength, that compassion does not require payment, that helping strangers is not foolish or naive, but the highest expression of what intelligent life can become. The Dominion is changing, she continued. The collective is reviewing its policies. Even the merchant guilds are talking about humanitarian programs. You have started something, Commander. Something that may transform the entire galaxy. Chen laughed softly. We just helped some people who needed help. Everything else is just consequences. Perhaps, Kethra smiled, but I think the consequences are going to be beautiful. They sat together until the stars came out. Old friends from different worlds, watching the beginning of something new. Below them in the city called Hope, the future was being built. Humans and Velathy worked side by side, learning each other's languages, sharing each other's food, becoming something neither species had been alone. Somewhere in the universe, other civilizations watched. They saw what the humans had done. They saw what was possible. And slowly, one by one, they began to change. The age of indifference was ending. The age of compassion had begun. And it had all started with a simple question. Will you help us? And an even simpler answer.